The first sign that something had gone terribly wrong was not the verdict. It was the silence that came before it. Across the heart of the known galaxy, inside the immeasurable crystal citadel where civilizations older than mountains gathered beneath a ceiling woven from living starlight, not a single voice dared to break the stillness. Thousands of delegates filled the colossal chamber, each representing an empire that had survived extinction, conquered impossible frontiers, or ruled entire star clusters. Bioluminescent beings shimmered like drifting constellations. Towering insectoid monarchs stood motionless behind polished obsidian armor. Machine intelligences projected themselves as floating geometric halos that pulsed with cold precision. Every eye, organic, synthetic, and everything in between, was fixed upon a single circular platform at the center of the chamber. There stood one human. Alone. His navy blue diplomatic uniform bore no medals of conquest, only the silver emblem of Earth resting quietly above his heart. Ambassador Elias Ward neither shifted his stance nor lowered his gaze. He simply waited, as though the outcome had already been written long before anyone entered the room. Beyond the transparent walls of the citadel, entire galaxies glowed like rivers of liquid fire, their swirling arms illuminating the chamber with ghostly blue light. Millions of citizens across inhabited space watched through quantum broadcasts, holding their breath as history balanced upon a single sentence. Then the voice of the High Chancellor echoed through every star system at once. It was ancient, calm, and utterly without emotion. By unanimous decree of the Galactic Council. The words rolled through the chamber like distant thunder. Planet Earth is hereby banished forever from all Council territories. Humanity shall hold no seat among us. No vessel bearing the Terran crest shall enter Council space. No trade, no alliance, no recognition. Any violation shall be met with immediate destruction. The declaration spread instantly across hyperspace communication arrays, reaching trillions of listeners before the Chancellor had even finished speaking. Around the galaxy, celebrations erupted on worlds that had long viewed humanity as an unpredictable anomaly. Markets speculated that Earth's economy would collapse within weeks. Admirals predicted surrender. Politicians congratulated one another for preserving galactic order. The Council believed it had just ended humanity's rise before it could truly begin. It was, to them, the perfect political victory. Inside the chamber, every alien delegate leaned forward, waiting for the reaction they expected. Rage. Pleading. Perhaps a desperate appeal for mercy. Entire civilizations had begged for far less. The air itself seemed frozen as countless recording drones floated silently above the assembly, capturing every heartbeat of the historic moment. Ambassador Ward closed his eyes, not in defeat, but in quiet reflection. A slow breath filled his lungs. Memories flickered behind his calm expression, blue oceans crashing against forgotten shores, children laughing beneath Earth's open sky, engineers working beneath hidden mountains, explorers vanishing into the darkness beyond the edge of known space. None of those memories carried fear. Only purpose. Only patience. Then, without warning, the human smiled. It was small at first, almost impossible to notice. The corner of his mouth lifted ever so slightly, as though someone had whispered an unexpected joke. Confusion spread across the chamber. Delegates exchanged uneasy glances. The smile widened. Then came something even more unsettling. He laughed. Not loudly. Not arrogantly. Just a quiet, genuine laugh. The sound echoed through the silent hall like the first crack in a frozen world. Every instinct possessed by the galaxy's oldest species screamed that something was wrong. Victorious men did not laugh like that. Condemned men certainly never did. The High Chancellor hesitated for the first time in over 3 centuries of rule. Military commanders instinctively tightened their grips on ceremonial weapons. Artificial intelligences recalculated probabilities millions of times within a fraction of a second. None of the outcomes made sense anymore. Because in that single laugh, humanity sounded less like a civilization that had lost everything, and far more like one that had finally been set free. For nearly 3 centuries, the Galactic Council had stood as the unquestioned center of civilization, a government so vast that its influence stretched across more than 12,000 intelligent species and millions of inhabited worlds. Its capital, the Crystal Citadel, floated within the radiant core of the galaxy like a monument to absolute authority, surrounded by fleets whose combined firepower could erase entire solar systems before a distress signal ever escaped. Every hyperspace corridor, every major trade route, every diplomatic treaty ultimately flowed through the Council's hands. Civilizations rose because the Council allowed them to rise. Others vanished because they challenged its order. To countless species, membership was not merely political, it was survival itself. Humanity had entered this magnificent machine only 80 years earlier, arriving with curiosity instead of arrogance, offering scientific breakthroughs, medical advances, and engineering solutions that astonished even civilizations millions of years older. While many races competed for influence through intimidation or wealth, humans earned trust by solving impossible problems. They repaired failing Dyson collectors around dying stars, stabilized collapsing wormholes that threatened inhabited sectors, and designed quantum reactors that doubled the energy output of entire planetary systems. To the Council, humanity appeared refreshingly cooperative, ambitious, intelligent, but ultimately manageable. That assumption would become the greatest strategic miscalculation in galactic history. Behind the polished smiles of diplomats and the endless ceremonies broadcast across the stars, another story unfolded in silence. Earth never stopped preparing for uncertainty. Deep beneath the Himalayan shield complex, inside command centers hidden beneath kilometers of reinforced crystal alloy, generations of scientists, historians, military analysts, and explorers worked under a doctrine older than humanity's first contact with alien life. Never depend on a civilization you do not control. Every treaty signed with the Council was studied not only for diplomacy but for the weaknesses it revealed. Every trade agreement exposed logistical patterns. Every cultural exchange provided insight into alien psychology. Humanity wasn't planning for war. It was preparing for independence. If the day ever came when the galaxy turned against them, Earth intended to ensure that its survival would never depend on anyone else's permission. Few embodied that philosophy better than Admiral Elena Ward. Tall, composed, and carrying the quiet confidence of someone who had spent more years among stars than on planets, she commanded the Deep Horizon Initiative, a mission officially described as long-range exploration beyond Council territory. Publicly, she was celebrated as one of humanity's greatest explorers, leading expeditions into unmapped regions where ancient pulsars, black nebulae, and rogue planetary systems drifted untouched by civilization. News broadcasts showed her smiling beside newly discovered star systems and shaking hands with alien researchers. But those broadcasts revealed only a fraction of the truth. Every voyage carried classified objectives known only to Earth's highest command. Ward wasn't simply charting empty space. She was searching for places where humanity could disappear if it ever needed to. Beyond the Council's carefully maintained borders lay an ocean of darkness that most civilizations considered worthless. Countless expeditions had declared those distant regions barren, unstable, and impossible to colonize. Humanity looked again. Hidden within gravitational anomalies and cloaked by naturally occurring quantum storms, Ward's fleets discovered entire stellar nurseries invisible to conventional sensors. Rogue stars wandered through intergalactic voids, each capable of sustaining colossal habitats. Ancient asteroid belts contained enough rare elements to fuel civilizations for millennia. Around silent neutron stars, engineers began constructing cities protected by magnetic fields so powerful that no known scanner could detect them. Massive orbital shipyards grew inside shattered moons. Artificial suns illuminated worlds carved from hollowed planets. Quantum relay gates linked distant systems together through pathways that existed beyond ordinary hyperspace. Piece by piece, decade after decade, an entirely new civilization emerged where no alien government believed life could survive. The remarkable part was not the scale of what humanity built, it was how completely they hid it. Council inspectors saw only ordinary colonies and modest research stations inside officially recognized borders. Trade officials recorded balanced imports and exports, never realizing that Earth's true industrial output had long since shifted beyond observable space. Cargo vessels vanished into exploration zones and returned appearing half-empty, while their real payloads had already been diverted through invisible gateways to hidden megastructures light-years away. Even Earth's population statistics quietly stopped making sense. Billions of people volunteered for deep frontier colonization, disappearing into classified sectors whose coordinates existed only inside encrypted quantum archives. The Council interpreted humanity's calm obedience as proof of loyalty. In reality, every passing year made Earth less dependent on the civilization that believed it controlled them. So when the sentence of exile was finally spoken inside the Crystal Citadel, Admiral Ward was nowhere near Earth. She stood aboard the exploration flagship Odyssey, drifting beyond the outer edge of the mapped galaxy, watching silent stars no Council astronomer had ever seen. As the transmission announcing humanity's permanent banishment reached her bridge, no alarm sounded. No officers panicked. Instead, dozens of experienced explorers exchanged quiet smiles. Some even laughed softly. Ward folded her hands behind her back and gazed through the panoramic viewport toward the endless darkness ahead. The order she had spent 30 years waiting to hear had finally arrived. Without raising her voice, she spoke just 4 words. Initiate Exodus. Phase Final. Across thousands of hidden worlds scattered beyond civilization's reach, dormant systems awakened simultaneously, ancient reactors roared to life, and humanity's greatest secret began to reveal itself, not as an act of desperation, but as the opening move of a future the rest of the galaxy had never imagined. The Council celebrated humanity's exile as though it were the dawn of a safer galaxy. Across the capital worlds, towering holographic monuments projected the verdict into the skies while politicians declared the Terran question permanently resolved. Financial markets reacted within seconds. Human corporations vanished from every interstellar exchange. Council banks froze every Terran asset with clinical precision. Trade convoys bound for Earth were recalled before they crossed the border, and customs beacons immediately marked every human registry as unauthorized. Admirals confidently predicted that a civilization so deeply woven into the Council's economy would collapse within months. Analysts estimated food shortages, industrial failure, civil unrest, and eventually surrender. The numbers were flawless. The logic was undeniable. Every historical precedent supported the same conclusion. No member civilization had ever survived complete isolation from the Council's network. It was mathematically impossible. Yet as the first week passed, then the second, something deeply unsettling began to unfold. Humanity did not protest. It did not negotiate. It did not retaliate. It simply disappeared. The silence spread faster than any fleet could travel. Automated trade stations that once bustled with human merchants remained powered, illuminated, and perfectly maintained, yet every docking bay stood empty. Cargo containers rested exactly where workers had left them, untouched, as though an entire population had quietly walked away between heartbeats. Patrol vessels entering former Terran sectors found orbital cities still rotating peacefully around their worlds, lights glowing behind millions of windows, but life sign scanners detected almost nothing. Parks swayed beneath artificial winds with no children playing. Transit systems continued running according to schedule despite carrying no passengers. Restaurants prepared meals that no one collected. Manufacturing complexes hummed with machine precision while producing equipment for destinations that no longer appeared on any navigation database. It was as if humanity had abandoned its civilization without leaving behind chaos, only eerie perfection. Veteran officers who had witnessed planetary extinctions admitted they had never experienced anything so profoundly disturbing. Empty worlds should decay. These worlds waited. Council intelligence immediately launched Operation Silent Horizon, deploying reconnaissance fleets deeper into former human territory than any foreign military had ever been permitted to travel. Hundreds of stealth drones slipped through asteroid fields, mapped hidden moons, and descended toward classified research facilities. Their reports only deepened the mystery. Entire military shipyards had vanished without signs of battle. Dry docks large enough to construct dreadnoughts floated empty, their magnetic cranes frozen in mid-operation. Underground bunkers contained abandoned command centers where holographic displays continued running obsolete simulations despite lacking a single human operator. Massive fusion reactors still generated enough power to supply continents, but no energy flowed toward inhabited districts. It was as though invisible hands had carefully unplugged civilization itself. Then came the sensor anomalies. Long-range observatories began recording impossible gravitational distortions rippling through supposedly empty systems, brief pulses strong enough to bend starlight itself before vanishing without explanation. Some scientists blamed experimental weapons. Others whispered about failed black hole technology. No theory survived closer examination. Among those studying the anomalies was Director Koresh, the Council's most respected intelligence strategist, an elder whose species had existed before many Council races had discovered agriculture. He had spent centuries dismantling rebellions, predicting political crises, and exposing hidden conspiracies before they unfolded. Yet every report arriving at his command chamber contradicted the last. Surveillance satellites vanished without transmitting distress signals. Autonomous probes returned with corrupted memories, insisting they had traveled through star systems that official maps claimed did not exist. Entire fleets occasionally lost contact for minutes, only to reappear millions of kilometers from their recorded positions with crews unable to explain the missing time. Koresh stared endlessly at holographic star charts, watching faint gravitational ripples bloom across regions that should have been completely lifeless. His instincts, sharpened by centuries of survival, whispered a terrifying possibility he refused to voice aloud. Humanity had not collapsed. Humanity had moved. Fear spread quietly through the highest levels of government, though none dared admit it publicly. Emergency meetings replaced celebrations. Military patrols doubled across every border. Civilian media received strict orders to continue portraying Earth's disappearance as proof of the Council's overwhelming success. But beneath that carefully maintained confidence, panic slowly infected those who understood the evidence. Every failed reconnaissance mission suggested planning beyond comprehension. Every abandoned colony hinted at impossible coordination across hundreds of light years. Every gravitational disturbance implied technology decades, perhaps centuries, ahead of anything the Council possessed. The question no longer concerned whether humanity would survive exile. The question haunting every intelligence officer was infinitely more dangerous. Where had billions of humans gone, and why did it feel as though they wanted the galaxy to spend precious time looking in exactly the wrong direction? Somewhere beyond the darkness of known space, hidden engines were already turning, ancient plans were quietly unfolding, and the silence surrounding humanity no longer felt like the aftermath of defeat. It sounded like the calm, measured inhale before something unimaginably powerful finally chose to breathe. The revelation arrived not with an explosion, but with a single classified file that should never have existed. Buried beneath layers of corrupted reconnaissance data recovered from a lost intelligence probe, Council analysts discovered an encrypted transmission carrying a human authentication signature older than Earth's admission into the Galactic Council itself. The timestamp froze every investigator in stunned silence. The document had been created 23 years before first contact. Director Koresh personally ordered the decryption, believing it to be little more than damaged historical data. Instead, the projection that emerged inside the intelligence chamber shattered centuries of certainty. A younger human officer appeared against the backdrop of an underground command center, speaking calmly to unseen listeners. "If you are watching this," he said, "then diplomacy has failed exactly as projected. Proceed to Exodus Final. Remember our first principle, never mistake acceptance for dependence." The room fell silent. Even the machine intelligences paused their calculations. Humanity had predicted this moment before they had ever met another intelligent species. The Council had not cornered Earth. It had stepped into a scenario humanity had rehearsed for generations. Emergency investigations unraveled secrets that had been hiding in plain sight for decades. Every trade agreement Earth had enthusiastically signed contained subtle logistical patterns that quietly mapped the Council's transportation network. Every joint scientific mission had allowed human engineers to study alien infrastructure from the inside. Every diplomatic visit had become an opportunity to catalog political rivalries, economic dependencies, military response times, and hyperspace bottlenecks. The Council had mistaken relentless curiosity for youthful enthusiasm. In truth, humanity had been building the most comprehensive strategic archive in galactic history. Hidden beneath ordinary commercial algorithms were predictive models capable of simulating entire civilizations years into the future. They knew which empires would support sanctions, which admirals would demand military intervention, and which corporations would panic first when trade collapsed. Humanity hadn't merely prepared for exile, they had forecast almost every decision the Council would make after announcing it. Then came the discovery that truly broke the illusion of control. Deep space telescopes tracking the mysterious gravitational disturbances suddenly pierced a rare quantum storm that had obscured an unexplored sector beyond the galactic rim. What appeared on the screens left seasoned astronomers speechless. There, drifting around rogue stars invisible from normal hyperspace, floated structures so immense they dwarfed planets themselves. Gigantic ring habitats circled artificial suns whose energy signatures exceeded anything the Council could manufacture. Moon-sized shipyards silently assembled fleets unlike any vessel recorded in the Council's archives. Entire worlds had been hollowed into living cities glowing beneath transparent crusts. Vast orbital arrays harvested power directly from distorted spacetime. Billions of human life signs radiated across thousands of hidden systems previously dismissed as empty wilderness. Humanity had not fled into darkness. They had transformed darkness into home. As more sectors emerged from the quantum veil, the scale of Operation Exodus became impossible to comprehend. Thousands of concealed quantum gateways activated in perfect synchronization, linking hidden colonies across distances once considered physically impossible to cross. Fleets vanished into one gateway and emerged moments later on the opposite side of neighboring dwarf galaxies. Entire economies operated independently from Council trade. Agricultural worlds produced enough food to sustain populations far beyond Earth's official census. Automated factories carved dreadnought hulls from captured asteroids while artificial intelligences coordinated construction with flawless precision. Most astonishing of all, unfamiliar starships bearing symbols no Council database recognized began arriving through the gateways, not invaders, but allies. Ancient civilizations from neighboring galaxies greeted humanity with ceremonial broadcasts, speaking of treaties forged decades earlier in complete secrecy. While the Council had debated whether humans deserved membership, humanity had quietly become part of something vastly larger. Director Koresh stood alone before the panoramic observation window of the Intelligence Directorate, watching holographic maps rewrite themselves faster than computers could process the incoming data. Entire regions once colored as unclaimed space now glowed with thousands of hidden human settlements. New diplomatic networks stretched beyond the edge of every known chart. Military projections collapsed one after another until the simulation engine simply returned the same impossible conclusion: Council strategic dominance, obsolete. For the first time in centuries, the old strategist understood what Ambassador Ward's quiet laughter had truly meant inside the Crystal Citadel. Earth had never viewed the Council as the center of civilization. It had merely treated it as one chapter in a much larger story. The sentence of exile had not destroyed humanity's future, it had unlocked it. And as countless hidden gateways blazed to life across the darkness between galaxies, one terrible realization settled over every leader in the Council. They had not expelled humanity from the galaxy. They had isolated themselves from the civilization that was already building the next one. Panic spread through the Galactic Council with a speed no fleet could match. Emergency sessions replaced ceremonies. Military commands overrode civilian governments. Across thousands of star systems, hyperspace navigation beacons began reporting catastrophic failures as familiar routes twisted into unstable currents of distorted spacetime. Merchant convoys vanished into collapsing corridors and reappeared weeks later, scattered across uncharted sectors with no memory of how they had survived. Entire battle groups found themselves stranded between stars, unable to reach strategic worlds that had once been only hours away. The Council's economy, built upon predictable hyperspace lanes and centralized control, began unraveling before anyone fired a single shot. Then the impossible explanation arrived. Humanity had activated the Horizon Lattice, a hidden network of gravitational resonators secretly positioned across interstellar space during decades of peaceful exploration. Working together, the colossal devices subtly reshaped the fabric of hyperspace itself. Ancient routes maintained by the Council became dangerously unstable, while entirely new corridors emerged beyond the galactic frontier, corridors that only human navigation systems could safely interpret. Civilization's highways had been rewritten overnight. The galaxy had not been conquered by force. It had simply awakened to discover that the map no longer belonged to those who once ruled it. Inside the command bridge of the flagship Odyssey, Admiral Elena Ward watched the transformation unfold in complete silence. Endless holographic projections floated before her, displaying thousands of blue lights blooming across neighboring galaxies as hidden gateways synchronized with the Horizon Lattice. Around her, officers moved with calm professionalism, issuing commands not in desperation but with quiet confidence earned through decades of preparation. Every screen confirmed the same extraordinary reality. Human colonies once believed isolated now stood connected through an intergalactic web stretching farther than any civilization had imagined possible. Supply fleets crossed millions of light-years in hours. Medical ships reached distant settlements before emergency calls had fully transmitted. Scientific expeditions poured into unexplored galaxies untouched by conflict or politics. Ward felt no satisfaction in the Council's suffering. She had spent her life hoping this protocol would never be necessary. Yet as she stared into the endless ocean of stars beyond the viewport, she understood what history demanded. Freedom carried a price. Humanity had simply chosen to pay it long before anyone else recognized the bill was coming. Unable to accept defeat, the Council gathered the largest armada ever assembled. Tens of thousands of warships representing hundreds of species surged toward the newly discovered human frontier, their commanders convinced overwhelming force would restore order before Earth's hidden civilization could fully organize. The fleet entered the first human-controlled corridor with weapons primed, expecting desperate resistance. Instead, silence welcomed them. Sensor arrays detected no defensive formations, no minefields, no attack squadrons. For one uneasy moment, several admirals believed humanity had retreated once again. Then the stars themselves began to move. What had appeared to be ordinary stellar bodies slowly unfolded into structures beyond imagination. Entire Dyson spheres awakened like ancient titans, their outer shells rotating with deliberate precision as continents of solar collectors ignited in brilliant waves of gold. Planet-sized defense platforms emerged from within gas giants. Moon-sized autonomous dreadnoughts detached from the shadows of artificial worlds, their hulls etched with glowing quantum circuitry older than many Council civilizations. None of them fired. None needed to. The sheer scale of humanity's hidden defenses crushed every hope of military victory before the First Order could even be spoken. Across secure frequencies, panic replaced discipline. Admirals demanded firing solutions, but targeting systems refused to lock onto objects whose energy signatures exceeded every known combat algorithm. Artificial intelligences warned that even a full fleet barrage would barely scratch the defensive shells surrounding the colossal megastructures. Then unfamiliar transmissions appeared on every bridge simultaneously. Fleets from neighboring dwarf galaxies emerged through shimmering gateways, their designs unlike anything recorded in Council databases. These were the civilizations humanity had met beyond the frontier, ancient powers whose star empires stretched across galaxies the Council had never reached. Their arrival carried no declaration of war, only silent confirmation that Earth no longer stood alone. Admiral Ward's image materialized across every Council command screen. Her expression held neither anger nor triumph. Only quiet certainty. "You believed control created peace," she said calmly. "We believed trust created the future. That is why you built borders, while we built bridges." Behind her, countless allied fleets assembled in disciplined silence, their numbers growing until even the stars seemed hidden beneath their formation. One by one, Council commanders issued the order no military leader ever wished to speak. Retreat. Massive fleets turned away without firing a shot, disappearing back into shrinking hyperspace corridors as the realization settled across every bridge. Humanity had not defeated them through superior weapons alone. Humanity had outgrown the very system the Council had spent millennia protecting. The old balance of power ended not in fire, but in irrelevance. As the final Council battleship vanished into the darkness, the horizon lattice continued glowing between galaxies like a constellation woven by human hands, linking worlds through cooperation instead of domination. Standing upon the bridge of the Odyssey, Admiral Ward watched the retreating fleet become distant points of light before whispering words meant only for herself. No one was ever meant to rule the stars. Ahead lay an endless universe waiting to be explored, and humanity, carrying courage instead of conquest, sailed forward, not as exiles, but as pioneers of an age no Council would ever control again. Centuries slipped quietly into history, and the day the Galactic Council had proudly named the Great Exile came to be remembered by every child in the settled universe under a very different name: the day humanity was set free. Time had erased the fear, the anger, and the political speeches that once echoed through the Crystal Citadel. The mighty Council itself had become little more than a chapter preserved inside ancient archives, studied by historians as an example of how even the greatest empires could mistake authority for destiny. The Crystal Citadel still drifted near the galactic core, but its once crowded halls now served as a museum where visitors wandered beneath silent banners that had once represented 12,000 civilizations. Dust gathered where senators had argued over power. Empty council chambers reflected only the light of distant stars. Guides no longer spoke of military victories or economic dominance. Instead, they told visitors about a single decision that unintentionally changed the future forever, a vote meant to isolate one civilization that instead inspired it to reach beyond every known horizon. Far beyond those forgotten halls, humanity flourished in ways no strategist had ever predicted. The horizon lattice had grown into a breathtaking web of luminous gateways stretching not only across the Milky Way but into neighboring galaxies whose names had once belonged only to theoretical astronomy. Great exploration fleets sailed between spiral galaxies as effortlessly as ancient ships once crossed Earth's oceans. Entire civilizations collaborated without a single central ruler. Worlds specialized not because they were commanded to, but because they chose to contribute what they loved most: scientific research, ecological restoration, engineering, medicine, art, philosophy, and exploration. Artificial suns illuminated floating cities suspended inside stellar nurseries. Forest planets carefully cultivated by human and alien botanists preserved millions of endangered species rescued from dying worlds. Children of dozens of species attended the same academies, laughing together beneath skies where multiple galaxies shimmered like rivers of silver. Humanity had not built an empire. It had built a network of possibilities, proving that unity could exist without domination. Among the countless ships crossing the intergalactic frontier, one vessel remained legendary above all others. The exploration flagship Odyssey, preserved and lovingly maintained through generations, no longer carried soldiers preparing for uncertainty. It carried dreamers. Scientists, explorers, artists, and students walked the same corridors where Admiral Elena Ward had once given the quiet command that activated Operation Exodus. Her personal quarters had been preserved exactly as they were on her final voyage, a simple room overlooking the stars, filled with handwritten journals, faded navigation charts, and a single photograph of Earth rising over the moon. Visitors often lingered there in silence, reading the final entry she had written shortly before her death. The universe was never something to conquer. It was always something to meet. Those words became required reading in academies across 1,000 galaxies, reminding every generation that courage was measured not by the worlds one captured, but by the unknown one dared to explore. Near the outer edge of humanity's first intergalactic gateway stood a monument unlike any other. Forged from the original hull plating of the Odyssey, it floated in open space where travelers from countless civilizations routinely paused before continuing their journeys. There were no statues of warriors. No lists of victories. No weapons carved into its polished surface. Only a simple arch of silver alloy reflecting the endless stars beyond it. Across its center, engraved in dozens of languages, rested the quiet sentence spoken by humanity after the Council's judgment centuries before: "Thank you for setting us free." Pilots often reduced their engines to silence while passing the monument, allowing themselves a brief moment of reflection. Even those who had never known Earth's history could feel something profound in its presence. It reminded them that history's greatest defeats sometimes disguised history's greatest beginnings. Somewhere beyond the mapped frontiers, where even the newest star charts faded into mystery, humanity continued its oldest tradition: exploration. New galaxies opened before them like unwritten pages. Strange civilizations welcomed them with curiosity instead of fear. Ancient cosmic phenomena once believed impossible slowly surrendered their secrets to patient minds willing to ask questions before drawing weapons. Every generation pushed a little farther than the last, not because they sought glory, but because hope had become part of their nature. Looking back toward the distant glow of the Milky Way, few even remembered the bitterness of exile. They remembered only the lesson it had taught, that no gate could imprison those willing to build new paths, and no council could define the limits of a species that refused to surrender its imagination. And so the story of Earth was never remembered as the tale of a civilization that had been banished. It became the story of a people who smiled when every door was closed, because they had already seen the countless doors waiting beyond them. Across the endless darkness, children gazed through observatory windows at galaxies still untouched by any map and whispered the same promise their ancestors had carried into the unknown: there is always another horizon. As the ancient Odyssey disappeared once more into the sea of stars, its engines glowing softly against the infinite night, the universe seemed impossibly vast, yet somehow, because humanity never stopped believing, it felt a little less lonely. And somewhere beyond the last visible galaxy, where tomorrow was forever waiting, the spirit of Earth continued to smile, still free, still searching, and still proving that the greatest journey begins the moment the impossible becomes an invitation.